A sharp, impatient knocking shattered the early morning quiet. Jake sat upright in bed, heart pounding as the sound repeated, louder this time. He threw off the covers, adrenaline wiping away the last traces of sleep. A glance at the clock told him it was barely past 7. Who the hell was banging on his door at this hour? Rubbing his face, he stumbled toward the front door, still in sweatpants and an old t-shirt. As soon as he pulled it open, he was met with a city official standing stiffly on the porch, clipboard in hand. Behind him, parked at the curb, was a white municipal vehicle with the city's logo stamped on the side. "Mr. Reynolds?" The man's voice was clipped, professional but not unkind. "Yeah." Jake's gut twisted. "We've received a complaint regarding an unauthorized home addition on your property." Jake blinked. "Hey, what?" The inspector shifted his weight. "Your construction project. Someone reported it as unpermitted. I need to inspect the site and verify your permits." It took a moment for the words to settle. Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. His home addition, the sunroom he'd spent months planning, hiring contractors for, pulling permits, and jumping through every legal hoop to ensure was by the book. Someone had reported it? Not just someone. He turned his head slightly, already knowing what he'd see. Across the street, standing on her perfectly manicured lawn, was Karen. Arms crossed, lips pursed, radiating self-satisfaction like a villain in a soap opera. Jake clenched his jaw but forced his expression to remain neutral. "Sure," he said, stepping aside. "Come take a look." The inspector followed him around the house, eyes scanning the partially finished structure. Jake had been overseeing the construction carefully. Everything was in compliance. He had the permits in a neat folder in his office, but still the accusation stung. He knew exactly why Karen had done this. She had always been a nightmare of a neighbor, the self-appointed ruler of their suburban street. Every little thing that didn't meet her impossible standards was grounds for a complaint. Lawn too long? Expect a notice. Trash bin left out an hour late? Reported. She lived for control, for making people jump through hoops, and Jake had refused to play her game. So this was her revenge. As the inspector did his rounds, Jake could feel her gaze drilling into his back. She wasn't even trying to be discreet about it. He imagined she was enjoying this, the disruption, the inconvenience. Maybe she thought she'd find something illegal, something that would let her win whatever absurd neighborhood power struggle she had conjured in her head. The inspection didn't take long. The official glanced at his paperwork, checked measurements, and scribbled a few notes. "Everything looks to be in order," he finally said. "I'll need to review the original permits and verify the paperwork matches, but from what I can see it looks fine. Until that process is complete, I'm required to ask you to pause any further construction." Jake exhaled through his nose. "How long does that take?" "A few days. Maybe a week." "A week?" A week of delays, extra costs, and contractors waiting around because Karen had nothing better to do with her time. He thanked the inspector, shook his hand, and watched as he got back into his car. As soon as the vehicle pulled away, Jake turned on his heels and strode across the street. Karen didn't move. If anything, she seemed to plant herself even more firmly, chin slightly raised, watching him approach as if she had been expecting this confrontation. "Morning, Jake," she said sweetly. He kept his tone level. "You reported my home addition." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, did someone?" "Well, if there was an issue with permits, it's always best to get these things checked, don't you think?" His fingers curled into fists. "I have permits. You know I do." Karen shrugged, the picture of passive-aggressive politeness. "If everything's legal, then I don't see why it's such a big deal." He wanted to say something sharp, something that would wipe that smug expression off her face. But he knew her type. People like Karen thrived on provocation. The more he reacted, the more she won. Instead, he stepped back and gave her a slow, deliberate nod. "Right," he said. "Well, thanks for your concern." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, her expression flickering just slightly as she realized she hadn't gotten the rise out of him that she'd wanted. Back inside, Jake paced the living room, his frustration mounting. His wife, Emily, leaned in the doorway watching him with arms crossed. She had heard the entire exchange. "She's unbearable," Emily muttered. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "I knew she was petty, but this? She's literally costing us money now. What are you going to do?" He sighed, shaking his head. "For now, nothing. I'll let the city review the paperwork and clear the project. She wants me to freak out. Not gonna give her that satisfaction." Emily studied him for a moment before saying, "I have a feeling you're not going to let this go." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly. Across the street, Karen was still standing on her porch, pretending to check her phone but obviously keeping an eye on their house. No, he wasn't going to let this go. But he wasn't going to fight her on her terms either. Because if Karen wanted to play the neighborhood watchdog, she had better hope her own house was squeaky clean. And Jake had a feeling it wasn't. Nights in the neighborhood were supposed to be quiet. That was one of the reasons Jake had chosen this place. A peaceful suburb just far enough from the city to avoid chaos but close enough to keep life interesting. But as he sat on his porch with a cold beer in hand, watching the streetlights hum against the darkness, he noticed something strange. Karen's house was anything but quiet. A car pulled up in front of her driveway, headlights bouncing off her pristine, regulation-approved hedges. The vehicle idled for a moment before two people stepped out, young, early 20s, dragging suitcases behind them. Jake frowned as they walked up to Karen's front door, checking their phones before typing something into a keypad. A moment later, the lock clicked open and they stepped inside. Weird. Jake took another sip of his beer, pretending not to care. Maybe they were friends visiting from out of town. Maybe Karen had family staying over. He wanted to believe that, but something gnawed at the back of his mind. The next evening it happened again. Different car, different people, same suitcases. And the night after that, another set. By the fourth night, Jake's gut told him what he already suspected. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern. Karen was running some kind of short-term rental. It wasn't just the rotating cast of strangers that gave it away. It was the little things, the way guests stood on her porch, squinting at their phones like they were checking an app. The way they awkwardly maneuvered their luggage, looking around as if unsure whether they were in the right place. The way none of them ever greeted Karen as if they had no idea who actually lived there. Jake leaned back in his chair, considering his options. He didn't want to be the kind of person who made trouble for others just to get even. He wasn't Karen. But this wasn't just about her anymore. If she was running an Airbnb out of her house, it was illegal in their neighborhood. The HOA had strict rules against short-term rentals, something Karen of all people should have known. The hypocrisy was almost laughable. She had reported his fully legal construction, wasting his time and money, yet here she was violating zoning laws like they didn't apply to her. Jake tapped his fingers against the armrest, watching as yet another car pulled up, dropping off a couple with oversized backpacks. Fine. If Karen wanted to play watchdog, then she was about to see what it felt like when someone watched her. The next morning, Jake started gathering evidence. It wasn't hard. He scrolled through Airbnb, filtering for listings in their area. It took him less than 5 minutes to find it. ***, charming suburban getaway, quiet, safe and close to downtown. The pictures confirmed it. Karen's house. He clicked on the listing details. $150 per night. Self-check-in with keypad. No parties, no smoking, no pets. Jake smirked at that last rule. No pets? She had called the HOA on a neighbor once for letting their golden retriever pee too close to her yard. But sure, no pets allowed. The reviews went back months. Karen had been running this operation for nearly a year. He kept digging. The city's website had clear rules. Short-term rentals required a permit, and even then only certain areas allowed them. Their neighborhood wasn't one of them. That meant Karen was operating illegally and had been getting away with it. Jake wasn't going to let that slide. That afternoon he set up a camera facing the street, not Karen's house directly, but angled just enough to catch the steady stream of guests arriving. He made sure to casually walk past her house a few times, noting the keyless entry, the suitcases, the Uber drop-offs. Every little piece of evidence stacked up against her. The best part? Karen had no idea she was being watched. A few days later he got his golden ticket. A group of loud, excited guests had arrived late in the evening, chatting animatedly as they pulled their bags onto the porch. As Jake watched from his window, one of them took a selfie with the house behind them, laughing. Then they captioned it aloud. Finally made it. Best Airbnb ever. Jake didn't even have to try. They were handing him the proof on a silver platter. He took a deep breath, steadying himself before pulling out his phone. The city's complaint form was simple. He uploaded screenshots of Karen's listing, attached pictures of the frequent guest turnover, and cited the zoning laws she was violating. Then, with a satisfied tap of his finger, he hit submit. For the first time in weeks, Jake felt at peace. Karen had started this war. Now she was about to see what it felt like to be on the losing side. A quiet tension settled over the neighborhood in the days that followed. Jake went about his routine as if nothing had changed, watering his lawn, chatting with neighbors, sipping coffee on his porch in the mornings. But beneath the surface he was waiting. waiting for the storm to break. And then one afternoon it happened. A black sedan pulled up in front of Karen's house. It wasn't an Uber or a guest rental car. This one had a city emblem on the door. Jake recognized it immediately. Code enforcement. Two officers stepped out, one checking a clipboard, the other adjusting his belt. They approached Karen's door and rang the bell. Jake leaned back in his chair, watching the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. A few moments later, Karen appeared, stepping onto her porch with that same tight, self-important posture she always carried. From his vantage point, Jake couldn't hear what was being said, but he saw the shift in her expression, how her smugness melted into something else. Panic. She gestured wildly, shaking her head, arms crossed in clear frustration. The officers remained impassive. One handed her a sheet of paper. She snatched it, skimming the contents, her mouth tightening. And just like that, the game had changed. For the first time since their silent war had begun, Karen wasn't in control. Jake didn't need to see the notice to know what it said. A cease and desist order, likely accompanied by a hefty fine. If the city was feeling particularly strict, they might even pursue legal action. She had been operating for too long, making too much money, and someone, had made sure it was all documented. Karen turned her head suddenly, eyes scanning the street. Jake barely had time to school his expression before she spotted him. Her gaze locked onto him like a hawk spotting prey. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Karen's nostrils flared and she stormed off her porch, straight toward him. Jake took a slow sip of his coffee, setting the mug down just as she reached his yard. "You," she hissed, voice low and furious. "You did this." He raised an eyebrow. "Did what?" "Don't play dumb, Jake." Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "You reported me." Jake tilted his head, pretending to think. "You mean like how someone reported my fully permitted home addition?" That would be awful, wouldn't it?" Her face darkened. "This isn't the same. Isn't it?" He let the question hang in the air. Karen took a sharp breath, stepping closer. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This could ruin me." Jake's lips twitched, but he kept his expression neutral. "Oh, I doubt that, Karen." "Fine. Maybe a legal headache? Sounds like something that could have been avoided if you just followed the rules. But then again, I'm sure you already knew that. You always know the rules, don't you?" Her eyes flashed with something dangerous, desperation, rage, maybe both. "You're going to regret this," she snapped. Jake simply leaned back, spreading his arms in mock surrender. "I don't know, Karen. I'm sleeping pretty well these days." She stood there for a moment, trembling with barely contained fury. Then, without another word, she spun on her heel and stalked back toward her house. Jake watched her go, waiting for her to slam the door. She didn't. Instead, she paused just before stepping inside, shoulders stiff. Then, as if making a silent vow, she disappeared. Jake exhaled, shaking his head. He had won the battle. But something told him the war wasn't over yet. The quiet after the storm didn't last long. For the next few days, Karen's house was unusually still. No new guests arrived, no cars idled at the curb, no suitcase wheels rattled up her driveway. It was almost eerie, like a wound trying to heal, except Jake knew better. This wasn't surrender. This was planning. Karen wasn't the type to take a loss and move on. So when it happened, he wasn't surprised, just impressed by how far she was willing to go. It started with whispers. Neighbors suddenly avoiding his gaze. Mrs. Thompson across the street, who usually stopped to chat during her morning walks, now crossing to the other side without so much as a wave. A few of them stood together in clusters, throwing him glances, murmuring. Something was up. Then a letter arrived in his mailbox. Not an official one, no city emblem, no return address, just a plain envelope sealed tight. Inside, typed in neat, almost clinical font, was a message. "We don't need troublemakers in this neighborhood. Stop causing problems or maybe problems will start finding you." No signature. No name. Jake read it twice, a slow grin spreading across his face. Karen was getting desperate. She had lost her Airbnb scheme, and now she was trying to turn the neighborhood against him. A pathetic move, really. But also a dangerous one. If she was rallying support, that meant she still had cards to play. And sure enough, the next day the HOA came knocking. The president, Mr. Hensley, a balding man with a perpetual frown, stood at Jake's doorstep, clipboard in hand. Beside him, Karen, arms crossed, lips curled in satisfaction. "Jake," Hensley sighed, flipping through his notes, "we need to talk." Jake leaned against the door frame, utterly unbothered. "Sure. What about?" Karen's voice cut in sharp and eager. About the eyesore in your backyard. Jake didn't react. He just stared at her. The what? The addition, Hensley clarified, rubbing his temples. Karen brought it to our attention that it might not be up to code. Jake blinked slowly. Might not be up to code? Karen lifted her chin. It looks questionable. Karen, he said, fighting a laugh, the city approved it. You know this. Well, she said, feigning concern, we just want to make sure. Jake exhaled, shaking his head. Fine. Do whatever you need to do. Karen's smirk faltered slightly. She had expected a fight. Instead she got indifference. Because Jake knew something she didn't. When the inspection came, it would confirm what he had been saying all along. His addition was legal. And when that happened, the HOA would know Karen had wasted their time, just like she had wasted the city's. She was digging her own grave. And so, when the inspector arrived 3 days later, clipboard in hand, Jake simply stepped aside and let him work. Karen, however, hovered nearby, practically vibrating with anticipation. The inspector walked through the addition, checked the permits, measured the structure, took his notes. Jake stayed silent, watching. Karen, meanwhile, couldn't hold back. Well, she blurted, arms crossed. Anything illegal? The inspector closed his folder with a snap. No violations. Everything checks out. Karen's face paled. But paperwork is solid, he added, nodding at Jake. Nice build. Jake smiled. Karen? She looked like she had swallowed glass. The inspector left, and for the first time Karen had no words. Jake could have let her walk away in shame, but he wasn't feeling generous. Looks like somebody wasted a whole lot of people's time, he said, tilting his head. Again. Karen's hands clenched. You think this is over? Jake chuckled. Oh, Karen. It's so over. She stormed off without another word, and for the first time in weeks, Jake felt the weight lift. That night, as he sat on his porch with a beer, he noticed something. Karen's house, once meticulously perfect, now had a for sale sign out front. Victory had never tasted so sweet.